everyone. Thank you all for joining us. If you don't mind grabbing a seat so we can get started. Thank you. Welcome to today's session, where we're going to be discussing how to address the global learning crisis through effective teacher professional development. My name is Ines, and I'm going to be moderating today's discussions on behalf of the Education Finance Network, which is a community of non-state actors working in education, of which VVOB, our host and organizer, is a member of. VVOB is an international organization with over 40 years of experience in strengthening the quality of education systems globally, namely through effective teacher professional development and school leadership. VVOB has been working with ministries of education and their institutions, as well as other partners such as committed donors, research organizations, and networks of experts in order to make sure that their interventions are sustainable and have the potential for being upscaled. This session will focus on sharing best practices alongside some new global exciting tools and resources for continuous effective teacher professional development for education, namely emerging from two programs, the Coach program by the World Bank and the Blend program by VVOB. We also hope that the event will be a good opportunity for all of you to network with people and organizations who are researching, designing, implementing, and funding teacher professional development. So please stay around after the session for the networking and breakfast. Without further ado, I'll now give the word to David Evans, who is a senior fellow at the Center for Global Development. Thank you, everyone.
Good morning. I'm excited today to be here at this event as kind of the warm-up act for two exciting, innovative tools to improve teacher professional development. And I want to start us off thinking about some general principles before we dive into these specifics. So I think what we're all trying to do with teacher professional development is we are fundamentally trying to help teachers be the best that they can be. So I think this is an audience for whom we don't have to kind of clarify that teachers are central to the learning process. All of the largest impacts that I have seen in reviewing educational interventions are through interventions that work through teachers. So there's just no way around it. Now, obviously, there are a lot of ways we can help teachers and improve the teacher workforce. Teacher professional development is just one of them. The other thing to keep in mind in terms of how important teachers are, people have done research in a number of different countries comparing students who are working with poorly motivated, poorly qualified teachers, so say the bottom 10%, and students who are working with teachers who are the most motivated and the most qualified, so the 90th percentile, among the best teachers. And what you find is, and we have here estimates from Ecuador, the United States, Pakistan, India. It depends on the study, but we find that in terms of student learning, over the course of a year, students can learn between 0.2 and nearly a full standard deviation more when they're working with a motivated, qualified teacher. What that means, standard deviation is a technical term, what that means students can learn double or triple what they normally learn in a year of schooling if they have an effective teacher. So, how do we get better teachers? So there are a lot of inroads. We can attract better teachers. We can prepare them better with pre-service training. We can improve how we recruit teachers. We can motivate them more. And then we can use in-service professional development to improve the quality of the teachers who are currently working. So today we're going to talk about improving, but I also want to note that as we improve the quality of teachers with effective professional development, that also serves as both a motivator and an attractor. So people are attracted to professions partly by money and other material amenities, but they are also attracted by the professionalization of the job. And so people want to become teachers if teaching is a good professional job. So effective professional development not only can improve the practice of teachers currently working, but it can also motivate teachers to work harder, and it can also attract new teachers into the field. Okay, so why focus on in-service professional development across all the areas that we could? And obviously we should be working across different areas to improve teachers. I'd say there are at least three reasons. One is governance. And so in many countries, reforming pre-service education means working through the universities, which can be a very arduous political process. Likewise, with reforming recruitment of teachers. Do we need to do these things? We absolutely do. But often, teacher in-service professional development is something that governments are already spending money on, often in relatively low-quality in-service professional development. So there's already a budget line, and this is often something that's within the scope of the Ministry of Basic Education or the Ministry of Education. And so from a governance perspective, it can be more easy to work in that space. Also, from a political economy perspective, when we look at other aspects of strengthening motivation for teachers, for example, building accountability measures which can complement support measures, sometimes the political economy around those measures can meet a lot of resistance. There tends to be very little resistance to good teacher professional development. Everyone wants teachers to be supported. And then the other reason is that we have evidence that teacher professional development can be effective, that it can work, but it doesn't always. So I'll start us off with just the promise and the perils, right? A couple of success stories and a couple of failures. So in terms of successes, we've seen some recent evidence, and this is just a taste. I could point to many, many studies, if I had an extra 3 hours, of great teacher professional development programs that have shown impacts. So coaching in South Africa was very effective, not just at the time the coaching was happening, but with measures a full year after teachers had finished receiving the coaching. A year might not sound like a lot, but actually very few educational interventions measure impacts over longer periods of time. At-scale coaching implemented through government systems in Peru. Initial face-to-face training, so giving teachers training in a particular method, then with follow-up coaching in assessment-informed instruction, so teaching teachers how to assess students' abilities and then to adapt their instruction in that way in Liberia, and then in mother tongue instruction in Uganda, again with an initial face-to-face training and then follow-up coaching in the classroom. So we know that teacher professional development can work, but at the same time, it often doesn't. I used to work at the World Bank, and when I would say, hey, we should invest in teacher professional development, these country directors would say, oh my gosh, like we have put money into teacher professional development for the last 30 years, and it hasn't done anything. The reason is because teacher professional development is often poorly designed, and as a result, it often doesn't work. Let me give 3 quick examples. So in China, the country's largest teacher professional development program was evaluated at scale. It had no impact on student learning, and upon analysis, it was very theoretical, it was very rote, it was very passive. Second, in Uganda, the same example that I gave as a success, that was implemented by highly motivated non-government organization employees. When that same program was implemented by civil servants, which ultimately to reach scale, most interventions have to be, it had no impacts. In fact, there was some indication that it had negative impacts on student learning, that students were worse off as a result of the professional development. Oh my gosh. Third example, sometimes we can't even really tell why. Like those are both kind of cases, okay, we have these unmotivated civil servants in this one case, and there are many motivated civil servants, but that's what the case was in that context. In China, we can tell it's a passive intervention. In Costa Rica, there was a secondary school math teacher professional development program. With everything I've read and studied about teacher professional development programs, I look at this program and I say, this should work. Zero impact on student learning, which is just to say, even when you get the ingredients right, we still have to evaluate because we can't always predict ahead of time what's going to work. We don't always know what went wrong. So, when I first started looking at this issue, I thought, well, maybe the high-income countries have this all figured out. Well, let me give an example from the US. Obviously, the US is not the highest performing education system in the world by any means, and I'll talk a little bit beyond that. But the US is a large country with a lot of variation, right? So a systematic review on math professional development in the US looked at more than 600 studies of math professional development in the US. Only 5 of them were of high enough quality to actually measure the impact of the program, right? And only 2 of them had positive impacts. So there's only so much we can learn from like, hey, here were 2 successful studies. Another major study of teacher professional development in 3 large districts around the United States found massive investments in teacher professional development, but very little improvement among teachers from year to year. And where they did see improvement, they couldn't find any link between the improvement and any particular teacher professional development or whether they had received teacher professional development at all. Now, that doesn't mean we don't learn anything from teacher professional development in high-income countries. So there are some broader lessons that draw from, obviously we have lessons from Finland, we have lessons from Singapore and other high-performing countries. A few of the things that come out of that literature is that teacher professional development, if it's going to change teacher practice and improve student learning, needs to be concrete, needs to be classroom-based, so at least have some element focused on in the classroom. It needs to be detailed and method-focused, right? So not general teacher professional development about, what does it mean to be a teacher, at least not by itself. It has to have significant contact hours over the course of a period of time. There's no effectiveness in these one-shot workshops. I once presented this in the town where my retired parents live. My mother is a retired teacher, and she came and heard my talk. I presented, some related work on this. And when we went back to their house afterwards, she opened up the closet and she pulled out this giant binder that she had received from one of these one-off workshops here in the United States on teacher professional development, which had no impact, of course, because my mother was already an amazing teacher. Okay, so the next question is, what works in low and middle income countries? Is it the same things? So Anna Popova and I and others looked at 33 quantitatively evaluated professional development programs in low and middle income countries. You can see across a range of countries. So we learned a number of things, and you can see echoes here of what has worked in high-income countries, right? So a specific subject focus, not general professional development, but teaching teachers how to effectively teach concepts in math, how to effectively teach literacy. Having an initial face-to-face training, right, which builds trust and instills certain skills. Having a proportion of that face-to-face training that is spent practicing with other teachers. So the less time people are doing what you're doing right now, and the more time they get to actually practice the skills, the more likely it's actually going to have an impact. And then, so this didn't come out in the quant work, but one of the things we did in this work was we interviewed the implementers of as many of these programs as we could, and we said, from your qualitative experience, what made this effective? And the most common response was having mentoring follow-up visits in the classroom. People learn something in this big group setting, they practice it, but when they get to the classroom, they need those follow-ups in order to actually implement those skills. But most at-scale, government-implemented professional development doesn't follow any of those principles, or most of those principles. So with that same team of authors, we looked at 139 government-funded, at-scale professional development programs across 14 countries. You can see a little map. So we have some representation in different regions. Obviously, this is not representative of the world, right? But it is indicative of something that we often see. So in this chart here, I compare these top-performing programs, so the programs that were rigorously evaluated, that we learned those principles from, to these at-scale programs. What we find is that in terms of a subject-specific focus, at-scale programs, those are the gray bars, they do pretty well, right? They're not quite as high as the top performers, but they do reasonably well. In terms of the amount of time spent practicing with other teachers, the top-performing programs, teachers are spending 40% of their time practicing with other teachers, whereas in most at-scale programs, that number is less than half that. Having an initial face-to-face training, most programs have that, most at-scale programs, still not as many as the top performers. The problem is that in the at-scale programs, there's very rarely anything to follow it up. So they have an initial face-to-face, but then only 50% of at-scale programs have any sort of follow-up mentoring. And so it's 50%, it's actually like 49.6%, so it rounds to 50. And the vast majority of those have exactly one follow-up visit, right? So maybe someone comes and visits your class. That is the best case scenario for most of these at-scale government programs. The other note I'll make as we went through these at-scale government programs is that most of them remain unevaluated. And when I say unevaluated, I'm not referring to a Rolls-Royce quantitative randomized controlled trial. We just asked the implementers of these programs, these government at-scale programs, did you have any sort of evaluation of this program on whether it changed teacher beliefs or knowledge, whether it changed teacher behavior, student learning outcomes, right? So they could just do a before and after comparison, and they could call that an evaluation. That's fine. And what we see is that the vast majority of programs are not evaluated for teacher behavior, and they're not evaluated for student learning. A lot of programs, about half, I guess it's striking that only half of programs even see if the teachers know more at the end of the training, right? And then very few see whether teachers do anything differently and whether that translates into student learning. So I've shown a little bit of some things we've learned in the past. Many people here were earlier this week at the Comparative and International Education Society meetings, where there were more than 100 presentations on teacher professional development of various forms. And so my colleague Amina Mendez Acosta and I went through these to try to see, well, what are we learning that's different than what we've learned before? So what we find across the CIES meetings, we find at least one professional development study from 40 different countries. This includes both qualitative and quantitative studies, with high concentrations in Tanzania, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya. You can continue down the list. There are a few countries here that definitely wouldn't have been on my radar as countries where we've learned a lot in the past. So we are learning more from new countries about how teacher professional development can work effectively. So this is a mix of kinds of studies. Obviously, CIES appropriately welcomes a wide range of approaches. So we've divided these into 4 different categories. So programs that are evaluations that are quantitative and qualitative, which are complements, and then evaluations that are descriptive versus evaluative, right? So descriptive is characterizing the program, which is still quite useful. Understanding what someone was able to implement, what some of the challenges in implementation were, is quite useful. But then programs that are evaluative, which say, they're looking at some sort of impact on teacher behavior or student learning. And you can see we have, a lot of studies coming out of CIES on characterizing programs qualitatively, but also quite a few on quantifying the impact of programs on some outcome. But one of the things that I found that's striking is if you compare these 2 maps. So the map on the left are the studies that we drew on for the evaluation of what works from rigorously evaluated studies. And then the map on the right is just the quantitative evaluative studies from CIES, right? So just to make it comparable, that's not discounting the value of these other studies. And what you can see is that those maps actually look quite comparable, right? There are some changes, right? There are a few additions. Uzbekistan made it in there, and we've got a couple of others, but there's still a lot of the world about which we're learning relatively little about teacher professional development and how to make it work most effectively. So a few things that I would say that we definitely still need to learn. We need to learn approaches to teacher professional development that work to improve student learning. And I define learning broadly. Obviously, one learning that we care about very deeply is fundamental skills, foundational skills, right? But we also know from good evidence that teachers are also crucial to developing socio-emotional skills and hard work and diligence, right? And so we need to understand what teacher professional development does to improve student learning when it's implemented at scale. So many of the programs that are evaluated are pilots, and that's fine. It's useful to learn what's possible to implement in this context. But what's possible to implement in a small pilot with a motivated non-government organization staff may be very different, and in most cases is very different from what's possible to implement at scale through government employees facing whatever incentives they currently face. Approaches that work to improve student learning when implemented or integrated into existing systems, right? So things that can actually be supervised by the regional inspectors of schools. Things that can work with adaptation, right? So obviously from country to country, programs will change, and understanding which programs are effective when adapted to local contexts and local conditions while still retaining the key principles is absolutely essential. And then the last I'll say is that almost all of the evidence that we have, almost all of the evaluation evidence that we have on teacher professional development programs is from high-income countries, upper middle-income countries, and a few cases from lower middle-income countries. There is very little evaluation evidence from low-income countries or from the lowest income contexts in in lower middle income countries. Now, obviously, we can draw lessons from one place to another. We can learn, certainly, but when we're going from urban India to rural Chad, there are some real limitations on how much we can sort of translate in terms of the capacity to implement programs and the like. And then beyond low-income contexts, the most fragile contexts. So I'll close just as a reminder. So teacher professional development can be highly effective, and it can have enduring impacts. And in many contexts, it is the most immediate tool available to strengthen teacher performance. So again, there are lots of inroads to improve teachers, and we need to work on all of them, but teacher professional development is often a tool that governments and donors working with governments can operate on in the immediate run. But it's easy to get it wrong, and so I think we need to be careful to avoid, we just need to do some sort of teacher professional development. I think often doing teacher professional development that has no impact may be worse than doing no teacher professional development at all, because it leads people who aren't deeply involved in education to think, this just doesn't work without that nuance. And so it's worth figuring out and investing in those programs, even if we have to start them at small scale, even if we have to rotate them around parts of countries, right? We can't necessarily roll everything from a budget perspective universally to everyone at once, but that's the trade-off potentially if we want to make sure we're doing teacher professional development that actually works. We still have a lot to learn. Today, we will hear about two approaches that are seeking to get it right, working within government systems that I'm excited about, both the Coach program and the Blend program. And let's do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David, for reminding us that there's still a lot we don't know, but also giving us an overview of what seems to be working to do teacher professional development in an effective way. We'll now hear from Anneli Rautiainen from the World Bank, who's a senior education specialist, and is going to provide us with an overview on the Coach program.
Good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here today to learn together. I'm a newcomer at the World Bank. I've been working there for 10 months, so I'm a newcomer from Finland, and I love it because there's so much to learn. And Dr. Evans, you said you're excited. I'm also excited about Coach, and I'm going to highlight some of the main characters of this initiative of the World Bank. Teachers are definitely the best resource we have for learning, but at the moment and throughout the years, we have lived in a very complex world, unpredictable world. We all have experienced it during the past few years more than ever in our lifetime before. So when the learning environment changes drastically, teaching, learning also changes, and that is something we all experienced as well. But when the learning environment changes, also the role of the teacher and the role of the student needs to change. If a student is in the middle of his or her own learning, picking up pieces to get a good life, to learn along the way, and look after the well-being of the world, of the family, of himself, the role of the teacher becomes more facilitating, more supportive, providing opportunities to learn and also to support the well-being, giving feedback, encouraging and stimulating the learning environment. Teachers are no longer the only source for knowledge, having everything delivered, pouring down to students' heads. Learning is everywhere, it is lifelong, and it is personalized. That's why countries must have essential programs and systems to support teachers to strengthen their teaching practice, not only at the time of crisis, but continuously. The World Bank is supporting teachers in low and middle income countries by improving teacher professional development based on teachers' needs. And I would like to add based on students' needs, which are huge. First, Teach Observation tool was created. It helps to measure and track teaching quality, time on task, classroom culture, social emotional skills, and interaction. This can be used as a system diagnostic tool providing continuous assessment of teacher practices to inform or personalize coaching, mentoring, and giving feedback. Based on the individual needs, the coach concept was designed to be the next concept to support. Coach professional development means that professional development is moving from one size fits all to be tailored to the needs of individual teacher. The data helps to prioritize and tailor learning opportunities. It is less theoretical and more practical. Theoretical knowledge is difficult to teachers to transfer into the practice. There is a need to focus on skills that are transferable to the classroom, and that should change the methods of instruction and learning overall. Coach concept changes the professional development from being general to being focused. There must be sufficient time for new learning and focus on targeting set of teaching skills at a time, providing also sufficient time to consolidate the new learning. And from having no follow-up to be ongoing, there is enough time to practice the new skills and improve and master the use of new teaching skills. The structures of professional development may include several ways: group training, one-on-one coaching, school or cluster-based learning, and self-study. It is important that every school becomes a learning community, which the principal is responsible for a pedagogical leader, as a pedagogical leader. A couple of examples in practice. In Pakistan, Punjab, they have 140,000 teachers using the Teach tool and smartphone application, following with the coach training. They have monthly teacher forums in which and teacher-mentor leadership programs. Mozambique has a large literacy program, very successfully approaching. Congo has a leadership program, and Angola Girls Empowerment Program. The strategy of the World Bank's Professional Development Program consisted developing the tools years 2021, piloting the programs 21-23, so it's ongoing, and there is a plan to scale up 23 to 24. The stages to adapt teach and coach concept to personalized teaching are to contextualize, to train key actors, to develop supporting materials, and define data sharing processes and usage. It's important to select coaches who are pedagogical leaders and train them well. How would this program otherwise be working? Data needs to be available during the coaching sessions to personalize learning. Professional development is a good support for teachers with some or little initial teacher education. However, I'd like to emphasize that where initial teacher education is available, teachers tend to find it too theoretical with little connection to daily teaching and learning. And there is definitely a lack of personalization. Too much theoretical content disconnected from reality and often focuses on too many skills at once. Unfortunately, in reality, poorly trained teachers are often trying to understand complicated curriculum and lack of high quality initial teacher training. Initial teacher education has a task, though, to make teaching an attractive profession, support the career structures, connecting knowledge and practice by providing strong practice, and provide continuous support by mentoring, coaching, and tutoring. We should not rely on teacher professional development only. Initial teacher education needs to be developed alongside well. However, mentoring, coaching, and individual learning communities support is very essential. They are tools to guarantee that learning continues and teacher skills are developed. We should not even forget the induction phase, which is very critical for young teachers. Many children have remained out of school and are not learning the basic skills in literacy and mathematics. Well-being of teachers and students is a great concern at schools, which have been closed for such a long time. The world is experiencing the learning crisis. We must do everything we can for students, teachers, families, and society to cope at this post-COVID time. There's a huge task to make sure children become literate everywhere and receive the skills needed to reach their full potential. That's why teachers can make a difference. We need every teacher. We cannot lose any students. They need all the possible support everywhere in the world. I would say, love what you teach, but love who you teach. It's important that we are in interaction with one another, student in interaction with the teacher in interaction with the school community, so that we can all learn from each other and learn together. I'm excited about the future of COACH. This was just a brief presentation, what I see important and what is the value of the program.
Thank you so much, Anneli. Thank you for providing us with an overview of how the COACH program is helping us move from this one-size-fits-all approach to personalized learning opportunities for teachers. We'll now give the floor to VVOB. We have today with us Jef Peeraer, who is the Global Strategic Education Advisor, and is going to give us an overview of the Blend program, as well as Lan Huong, who is the Strategic Education Advisor on behalf of VVOB.
Good morning, and thank you to be here. Excited to also explain and give you a bit of an insight in what we have been doing in the Blend project in the last 18 months, where we have been looking with the group of partners in how to do effective continuous professional development for educators, but then specifically in our current times, where we have all been challenged to rethink a couple of things on how to reach and how to work with teachers during and post-COVID, during the pandemic crisis. All of these organizations that have been part of the Blend project have been challenged to rethink what we do and to look into how we can work with teachers and organize professional development from a distance, with remote modalities, and also with looking into how ICT can be used to support the delivery of blended and online CPD programs. So we have already heard from Dave and from the insights he has shared on effective CPD, and we have also listened to how the COACH program works with that, and also some of the challenges related to the times that we live in. So we thought that it is very important to also think of how to do that in different modalities within the Blend project. So this has been quite a steep learning curve for most of the partners that we have been working with. So a lot of the work we have done was really to look into best practices, to share from each other's knowledge and experience on this. So we had the Blend project, in fact, consisting of 3 components. There was this global exchange amongst a number of partners. At the same time, we also had 2 components within the project where we really looked into how to redesign existing CPD programs for teachers and school leaders into online and blended formats. So within VVOB's work, we have looked into this in South Africa on the one hand and Vietnam on the other hand. Later on, my colleague Huong, she will share some of the insights that we have gained from shifting to blended CPD in Vietnam. But first I'm going to share a little bit more of the insights and also the outputs of what came out of this global learning trajectory. So we were very fortunate to have a large group of partners involved in this, and as I've said, all of us were kind of struggling with how to do this right. Effective CPD in itself is already quite complicated, what we have seen. It is not easy to find out exactly what works and what doesn't, let alone then also like how to do this in a different modality, in blended modalities. So we worked with a group of 8 partners. You can see them here. We have had Plan International, we have had Stir Education, Aga Khan Foundation, Right to Play, Pratham, VSO, BRAC, IED, together with VVOB, who were part of this professional learning community. Some of these colleagues and partners are also here, thank you very much. And in addition, we also got some feedback from the colleagues from Coach, from the World Bank, and from the EdTech Hub, with some reflections also on the insights and the work we have done with this group of partners. I'm not going to share too many of the details and the insights that came out of it. We are here also today to launch a guide, a product, so you can find the collected insights in the guide. What I can say is that we have designed this guide in a way that it consists of very practical guidance in around a number of key phases of developing continuous professional development, starting from the analysis of, for example, your target group, an understanding of the context in which you implement CPDs, with some guidance on how to design and how to develop, keeping in mind some of these principles that Dave also has shared, like how to make sure that you bring in enough practice. Then also some guidance on how to deliver and how to implement those programs that you have designed. For example, one of the elements you need to be sure of is that those who deliver the program, the facilitators, are also very well prepared, especially also if you're going to use some tools and ICTs to support the delivery, that they know how to use them. And also very importantly, we have seen that not all of the teacher professional development programs or CPDs have an evaluation component. We also provide some guidance on how to do evaluation of your CPDs, and also how using ICTs can help you in that with collection of data, the analysis of data, and the reporting of data on effectiveness of your CPDs. So it's a very practical hands-on guide with checklists and some tools, and also a large number of case studies from all of the partners that were involved in this Blend project. Before I give the floor to my colleague Huong, who will show how we have used these guidance in the project in Vietnam. Also very important is that within the guide we wanted to touch upon a number of what we identified as cross-cutting themes, important cross-cutting themes. The first one is on engagement and motivation. One of the challenges with shifting to online and blended modalities of continuous professional development is that it's a different story when it comes to motivation. Especially when you go to online delivery of CPDs, you see often a very high dropout rate after a first session of a CPD trajectory. So that is one of the cross-cutting themes, how to keep your participants engaged. A second cross-cutting theme that we touch upon in the case studies, but also in all of the steps within the guidebook, is on gender equity and inclusion. Again, especially when you're thinking about tools that can support, and especially ICTs that can support the delivery of CPDs, you need to be very aware of issues related to access and skills of how to use these tools, gender differences, but also, for example, different age groups that have a different skill set in the use of these tools. And then the final aspects is, the final cross-cutting theme is on cost effectiveness, scalability, and sustainability. Often we look at the use of technology also as a way to reduce the costs of implementation of CPDs. That is right, but again, it also comes with some critical thoughts on what are the implications of this. So these are a couple of things that we touch upon in the theme of cost effectiveness, scalability, also sustainability of the CPDs. We have a small teaser video about this toolkit, but we are going to keep that for after Hoong's presentation, and that will also be the end of our presentation then. So before that, I invite Hoong with some insights of how we have done this in Vietnam.
Thank you. I'm Hoong from Vietnam. I'm delighted to be here to share with you how the blended CPD can work in the Vietnam context. In the COVID context, there's a question about that when the school closed and how the student continue the learning. But how about the question about that how for the teacher to continue about their professional development? Yes, and I think that when the guy came, and VVOB Vietnam try out to design blended CPD trajectory for the teacher in Vietnam context. And when you see about it, it is really about the trajectory with the different element, and we try to combine about the online and in-person activity. For example, we start with the in-person training course on digital literacy to ensure that the participants have equipped the necessary skill to learn online. Yes, and after that, the participant will enjoy about the e-course on coaching, e-course on the PRC about the professional learning community, and even that in the online course, the participant have a chance to individual learning, but also to combine with the synchronous sessions, virtual in a Zoom platform. It's time for them to have share about what they have learned and about time for the Q&A. And because during about the individual learning, they have many questions, but now it's time for them to give a question and to get the feedback and support. Not about that they are individual learning and they are alone. And now it's time for them to support, and we can try to combine the element. And also about that when they finish about the e-learning course, it's not about that, okay, please go ahead and apply. Because I think that it always the starting point, the entry point for the teacher, because they need to support during the apply. And we also to offer about that to join about the online POC session about that in there. They really experience on how the POC session organized on online modality and in-person modality, and they combine about that when they join the POC session online, and after that they discuss about the idea on how to innovate their teaching methods, and they have to come back to that school and they try out, and they try with the real context, and they come back with the online POC session and to reflect and to sharing, and it's a chance for the people to learn together and learn from each other. And also we organize the online reflection workshop and the in-person together, and to make sure that all the people have an equal chance to join. And you see about in the trajectory, we try to combine about how the online and apply, how the synchronous section combine with the asynchronous section to make sure about that the learner have a experience with the different modality and address about the needs in the certain context. Yeah, and during we implement the blended CPD trajectory, and we gain about some main insight. Even that we know about when the new normal come back, seems to be that the people tend to value the in-person modality over the online modality. But however, it's a time for the blended CPD trajectory how to shift that mindset, because seems to be now they have more chance, and they have more modality to apply, not only in person, and now they're thinking about that, how about the combined with the online to be the blended approach. And when the school organize more online meeting, CBD by that the equity factor increase, because that now all the teachers have a chance to participate in the meeting. It's quite different in the previous time when the school tend to be organize a lot of the in-person meeting, and some teachers, there may be some reason they cannot arrange to come to the school. And see with that, they have a lot of chance to participate. And now when they organize the combine with the online meeting and the in-person meeting, that more teacher joy and equity it's promote at that time. And during implementation, we also have to draw some lesson learned. The first, to ensure that the participation in the blended CPD trajectory, it really requires about that how we have consider about the time, the workload, the preparation, the support, and how to motivate the people can go in the whole process, and not about the participate in a single activity and next one skip. And because in the whole trajectory, it can make you really about that develop their professional, And I think this part also to be considered very carefully in the first phase of analysis when we design the blended CPD trajectory. And it's more important about that we have to make sure about that the educator at all level, from the province level, district level, and school level, to understand well about that the blended CPD trajectory, because it's the other person to give the favorable condition and give the time for the teacher to join and to participate in the whole trajectory. And I think that to make sure about that, the teacher said that I cannot join in next meeting because I have urgent tasks that aside from the school manager, and it was quite difficult for them to say no to join in the meeting. And I think that it's very important to awareness of the manager. And I think that in overall, I think that the point about the balance when we design a blended CPD trajectory, but how we balance about the online, offline, how we balance about the synchronous and asynchronous sections, and see look like about that butterfly, how to keep the balance. And it's a balance about that depend on the local context and about the learning culture of in the certain context, and to make sure and we don't have a fixed formulation about the how percentage of to be balanced. I think can be very different in the local context, and we should consider about how the balance can be. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Huong. Very illustrative of how to keep the balance. Let me now look for the teaser video. I hope also the sound works.
Looking for a new and effective way to support educators' professional growth? Seeking to take advantage of technology but not sure how to do it? Say hello to Blend On. The Blend On guide provides instructions on how to find the right blend of in-person and remote learning methods for the continuous professional development of educators, also known as blended CPD. Co-create through a collaborative community of practice between 8 organizations. Blend On supports governments, institutions, and non-profits working with teachers, school leaders, parents, and communities. With Blend On, you'll have everything you need to succeed, with 12 easy-to-follow steps in 4 key phases, and helpful tools like checklists, reflection questions, and surveys. Real-life examples help you see how the steps work in practice. Innovate your approach to professional development with blended CPD that emphasizes engagement, inclusiveness, and sustainability for educators. Are you ready to blend on?
You can visit the website. The tool will be available very, very soon. In the meantime, you can subscribe and you will receive updates on exactly when the tool will be available, probably somewhere in March. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers. I think we heard a lot of common threads here about the importance to adapt to local context, the importance of feedback and communities in building and implementing these programs. We prepared some questions for the Q&A section, but we thought it was much more interesting to start by hearing from you, understanding where you're at, and giving you space to ask questions. So maybe I would just give the floor to you, and we have a mic here, so thank you.
Thanks for great presentations, everyone. Matthew Dukes at RTI. I was struck by the fact that, Anneli, your presentation ended by saying that teachers need to love what they teach and they need to love who they teach. And the Blend-On tool has this major component of engagement and motivation. But then if you look at the lessons from your evidence review, Dave, there's nothing that really comes out about motivation of teachers. And perhaps because it's easier to tell teachers what to do in a scripted lesson plan than it is to think about the more nebulous concept of motivation. So I guess the question I have is I'm interested in what the evidence base is for the blend-on component and what the state of the evidence is on motivation. I know of a few failed financial incentive attempts to get teachers to be motivated, but I'm curious about what the evidence base is and how we can improve it.
Motivation is the key, really. I come from a country, Finland, where we don't really have to motivate teachers because there are more that want to become teachers than what the intake can hold. But I think you must have, I guess, in any profession to be motivated to teach. And where is the focus? I mean, the focus is on teachers' motivation, but yet I think it reflects that the teacher is motivated and places the students in the middle. So students bring motivation to teachers. I guess in larger scale, one could say that I want to make this world a better place. That's why I'm a teacher. Why do you work as a teacher? What is that motivates you? It's not always the money or the salary, but it counts also, but not as a major point to motivate. It is to build on the future. I think teaching is a profession where you build the future. You're working for the future, for children, young people and adults. We're all learners. So I think it is a sort of not a trick that you can pour motivation on someone's head like the knowledge, but it's an inner call, so to speak. Some people don't like to say that because it's not necessarily professionalism, but it adds a little bit to the motivation, I think, anyhow.
So I think one of the things that's interesting as we, Anneli was talking about how in Finland, of course, there's lots more people who want to be teachers than become teachers. I was looking at a review recently that on average across a survey of a couple dozen African countries, there are almost 5 times as many people trained to be teachers as working as teachers. And a colleague and I have recently been doing some work where looking at surveys of teacher motivation, where you ask people like, oh, why'd you become a teacher? There's unsurprisingly an interesting contrast when you have a quantitative study where people rank why they become a teacher. They say, oh, I want to influence the future generation. I want to, you know. And then in qualitative studies where you have deeper conversations with respondents, many people are motivated intrinsically and do want to change the future generation, but you also have many more people who are willing to admit that they became a teacher because they didn't get into university, and so they got into teacher training college, and this was kind of the best of the professional jobs that they could reach. And so it's a very, you know, tackling motivation in that context, of course, is very different. I do want to be fair to the teacher pay for performance literature in the sense that my read of that literature is that in terms of trying to motivate teachers extrinsically, is that in many low and middle income environments, they've actually been quite effective in the time that they've been studied. But at the same time, they've never been scaled up because, you know, there's just, you know, there's either no political appetite or the systems that you need in place to do a system like that well just aren't present. I think I've seen very little evidence on so I've seen some mixed evidence on non-monetary, so like community recognition, giving rewards. So in the big reforms in northeastern Brazil, like Ceará and Sobral, that is an element of it, but it's sort of non-monetary rewards together with small monetary rewards and lots of other things. For me, I think one of the things that's suggestive is the evidence that we have, which is also pretty limited, but some positive evidence on school leadership, that having, you know, a great school leader, you know, really brings out more from teachers, which the reason I say it's promising is because I think it is suggestive that even with teachers who are not inherently motivated, if you put them in the right organizational structure, that it is possible to bring out better from them. It's possible to sort of bring out even people who teaching wasn't their first choice. Many of them still want to do well at their job if they have someone who they respect, who brings that out in them. So I think we have a lot left to learn in that space in terms of the quant literature, but there's some promising stuff that makes it well worth exploring.
So what I still want to add, my microphone doesn't work. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I think Davey touched upon the evidence base because I think that was your question. Within the Blend project, what we realized with this group of partners is that when you shift to especially fully online delivery of CPDs, we all realized that there is an issue of engagement and that there is a high dropout. Looking back at some of the principles of effective CPD, it's important to have a face-to-face aspect to it. It's important to have a sense of community within such CPDs. I can't say much about the evidence base for it, but these are also elements that have been identified as being effective with regards to CPD. And this is also confirmed in the experiences of the 8 partners developing CPDs. Of course, this comes at a cost. So I think that's one of the insights that we gained as well. Like if you organize face-to-face sessions, if you organize professional learning communities, quite often these are more expensive pieces of your CPD trajectory. So I think it's again about finding a bit of this right balance, also if you want to scale your CPD. So that's what I can share from the experience of the Blend group.
So maybe we'll take 3 questions.
We have a reaction from the room as well.
Hi, my name is Quentin, formerly World Bank, now with UNESCO ICBA. And so, building on the last few sentences, so what do we know about the cost-benefit analysis of the programs that are much more mentoring over time with multiple interactions? So can you tell us a little bit more? I mean, what would be the cost of the good programs per person versus the cost of the, between quotes, bad programs? And then what do we have in terms of benefit cost ratios? That would be very useful.
Maybe we can get a couple of other questions from the room and then the speakers answer.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Hakim Soba from 1 Million Teachers. I want to, I don't know if it's possible to get these presentations for us to, have them for our own reflection. Secondly, I'm interested in the lessons from Vietnam. How did you overcome the challenges of CPD? Because we work in several African countries. We support about 33,000 teachers at the moment. And one of the big barriers we face is access to online because of cost of data. And we found ourselves in a situation where we have to send money to these teachers to buy data for their phone. So I'm interested in how you, because they want to, but they just are not able to because of this huge barrier, how you got that out of the way for Vietnam.
Maybe we'll have two more, and then I encourage the rest of you to ask questions during the networking afterwards.
Great. Good morning, and thank you. My name is Rebecca Vieira. I'm with University of Colorado Boulder, specifically with the PhET Interactive Simulations Project. One of the things that was mentioned is the importance of a content focus. I know, Dr. Evans, you mentioned that. That's, of course, echoed by Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond. I think that's particularly true for secondary education, but I think also very much so in a lot of foundational literacies. So my question is, how do the two programs that have been shared today, how do they address that content focus? And specifically, how do you ensure that coherence, that cohesion, considering there's a lot of discipline-based discipline-based education research out there. How do you make sure that that gets in when you're dealing with so many facilitators and so many disciplines?
Yeah, thank you so much, but also thank to the presenters. I think the presentations were very insightful. Yeah. My name is Richard Ishukia. I work with the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, but also I'm supporting the Ministry of Education, trying to pilot the TCPD implementation. The government just approved the national TCPD framework, so now it's rolling out, but by phases. So I'm trying to support from the grants from the World Bank to just pilot in 26 kind of districts. Yeah, so it's just a reflection, maybe some remarks from Davis, but also to see how VVO maybe can chip in on this. Based on the framework, it is expected, the core element of this particular framework is the communities of learning at the school level, whereby teachers don't receive kind of initial training, but it's one of the teachers is selected as a facilitator to go and receive some kind of training, not to empower him in terms of pedagogical kind of content or whatever, but just to give him some knowledge and skills on how to come and facilitate the community of learning at the school level. So there are no initial training, but also the structure, the existing structure is the one that is supporting from the regional level, district level, the quality assurance, the ward education officers, but also the school levels. There are kind of school teams that are supporting the TCPD kind of activities at the school level. But also what the teachers do at the school, they're expected to convene as a group and discuss what they want to discuss based on the needs, their needs. It's not maybe focusing on a particular subject. So based on various needs across the teaching kind of phenomena. So it's not quite focused, but they decide. They're expected to establish a plan, the annual plan based on their context. And it's not that universal, maybe the whole country is doing the same thing at the same time to all teachers, but each school taking into consideration that Tanzania is diverse with a diverse kind of context. So I would want to hear your remarks on this. What do you think about this? And maybe if you were to advise what can be done, but also how VVOB can also think of the using this particular tool, the BEND tool, in this particular context that I've just explained. Thank you so much.
So I think maybe Jef and Lan can start perhaps discussing the question around cost-benefit analysis, some of the barriers to implementation on the ground, as well as this idea of communities and the role of teacher communities, and then we can go to each speaker and we all have a chance to address the questions.
Okay. I don't mind to start on the question related to costs, cost effectiveness, cost benefits. I think what is very clear when shifting to blended and online delivery modalities, what again we have seen amongst all of the partners, that this comes at a very high investment cost often, especially if you go to fully online delivery modalities and you need to set up a new online learning management system. You need to redevelop and redesign your trajectories and redevelop content. You need to also train facilitators. You need to invest in ICT skills of both trainers and trainees. So if you divide the different types of costs into the investment cost and the implementation cost, it is quite clear that this comes at a high initial investment cost, and that it becomes more effective when you go to scale, when you look at economies of scale. So that is one of the things that is very clear from the exchange. So that's what I can say on that. I think perhaps Huong can illustrate that with some of the insights related to costs in Vietnam.
Yeah, to address the question about the cost, the data cost, and how we can pay for the teacher when they join the blended CPD. Within the blend project that we pilot with the 4 provinces in Vietnam, and within the time, the participants join in the e-course and also to join in the online POC session, and we support them with the monthly data support. And after that, when they come back to their school and they facilitate their online POC session or organize online meeting, they use their own resources and to do it. Yeah, and until now, we didn't see many challenge on the support on the data, because I think that the way we support or we have give first condition for them to experience on how the online platform can work well in their context. Yeah. And the barrier, I think that the barrier also to come back about the motivation and also to the involvement of the participation of the learner, of the teacher, because as you know that the teacher are quite very busy with the full day schooling, and thinking about that, what time is available for the teacher to join the learning community in the weekend, in the evening, or something like that. We have discussed about that. Okay, maybe in the daytime from the Monday and Friday, maybe the school will have to take the afternoon off, and it's time for them for the teacher to have to join any the professional teacher meeting, the learning community. Yes, and I think it depends on the role of the manager, and we point about how about the leadership. Yeah, because I think the leader decides everything about that. If they really think about it's useful for them and they can benefit from that, and they can use their own resources and to make it happen. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn and Jef. Maybe, Anneli, I don't know if you'd like to speak to the cost-benefit question. I think also the question around communities of teachers and the role of communities in the coach program.
Yeah, about the question of discipline-based, or what the understanding of what needs to be the content, or who decides and what the need is. Basically, in the coach concept, there are tools to first find the need and also contextualize, find the coaching concept, which means that you must train the coaches. I think this is the key issue, and then also evaluate. And if the needs is in content knowledge, it certainly has to be taken care of first, but it shouldn't be separate from pedagogy. Each discipline has its own pedagogy, and then overall we know what the pedagogy is in learning. Discipline, knowledge, then pedagogy attached to that. But the need can be interaction within the class, or it can be giving feedback. So it depends. So then I would like to emphasize the importance of training coaches so that they are able to support one-on-one or group cluster-based or online-based, whatever the case is. the World Bank is at the moment planning and soon this spring starting a coach program. And it is called the Sunset Grant program that provides lower middle income countries pedagogical practitioners, leaders to take part in, so that we must make sure that those who train have the qualities and have been trained enough to deliver the concept. The concept is just a framework. It's always the what do you put it in, what do you use it for.
I'll just, on two quick things. Quentin asked about cost-benefit analysis, or I'm going to expand that to cost-effectiveness analysis. So it's very difficult to answer that because most studies don't measure costs. And so we did a recent review of education studies, recent studies in the last 5 years across African countries, and found that only 1 in 3 studies did any sort of cost-effectiveness or cost-benefit analysis. And so we just have a lot of studies of impact where we have no idea what the program cost. In terms of cost effectiveness, though, I think a couple of experiments in South Africa are instructive in this regard. So this is an early grade reading program, and they did, it was a randomized controlled trial where some teachers received kind of a traditional, gather in a ballroom like this in-service professional development, and other teachers received a coaching program, and they measured costs and cost effectiveness very carefully. What they found, unsurprisingly, is that the coaching program was much more expensive, but the benefits in learning were so much higher that the coaching program was still more cost effective than the traditional in-service training program. Now, on the one hand, as an economist, I'm like, well, it's the most cost effective. But we still, with a limited budget, have to grapple with the fact that it is expensive. And so even if it's still the most cost effective because the gains are so high, and so then the next thing South Africa did was they experimented with virtual coaching. They're like, what if we put the coach on a tablet? And what they found was that it worked really well for a very short period of time. And then everybody stopped using the tablets because they're busy. And so I think it's an ongoing figuring out how to take what works really well, which is coaching combined with maybe some initial training and what we've been hearing from everybody, and how to do that in a cost-effective way. It's not easy. I don't think we'll ever be able to do it cheap, but how we do it the most cost-effectively. On Richard's question about communities of practice, we had the pleasure to talk briefly a few weeks ago, and since then, I've been trying to look for the literature on this. It's very common. Lots of countries do teacher communities of practice. It's, I think they're probably really good for helping teachers feel part of a sense of community, and so part of this professionalization. I've seen almost no evidence on whether they actually translate to gains in student learning. That doesn't mean that they don't, but I've just seen almost no evidence. My prior is that because teachers have so many demands on their time already, that without using those communities of practice, but making sure that there's some added structure and direction to them, I think that if I were going to try something, that's what I would do, is say, okay, we're gonna have these communities, we gotta have them, we're training these sort of lead teachers to lead these communities, but we're, even though they're designing their own plan, maybe we'll provide them with some structure, because they have so many demands already that I would worry that whether or not they would just be able to invest the time to come up with a great plan and develop it. I would just be concerned, and then sort of putting some, structure around it. Obviously, there are requirements that they'll meet, and maybe having someone externally come and join an occasional meeting to provide some external motivation and leadership to add to what's happening already in this school. Those are some of the directions that I would do, and then I would definitely evaluate it to see whether it's translated into student learning.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of our speakers for sharing your perspectives on the subject. Thank you to VVOB for organizing this session, and thank you to all of you for being so interested in understanding how to do this and how to do this in a way that is effective. So I encourage all of you, I know we have a lot of questions, to use the networking and breakfast session that's just coming up to ask panelists questions and to engage with each other. Thank you so much.
The coaching in Vietnam, and we also do a lot of the training for the school manager and for the core teacher and how they can coach the teacher. And at that time we use the
Hi.
I want to try to get in touch with